who are we? CCLA difference what? Difference makers.
As well. All right. Well, good morning. We welcome you. So thank you for joining us today. My name is Ryann Derington, and this is my colleague, Jenean Bray. We are from the Tulare County Office of Education, and we are part of the CCLA Literacy Content Team. So we are pleased to be with you today. This is session, just to make sure everyone's in the right location, is Accelerating Reading Comprehension. So we're really going to be sharing strategies and tools for you to really enhance and accelerate comprehension for your students. We do have a lens through our CCLA grant, and that for literacy and what we're focused on today is really that 3rd through 8th grade. But many of the things that we share with you, though, will be applicable also to those other grade levels as well. So if you're feeling like there's a context specific to a certain degree, but we really tried to bring you strategies that are certainly evidence-based, but also universal for those grade levels. Having said that, these are our partners in the grant, so we want to recognize them and honor the other county offices who collectively we work together, as well as the CCEE. And we are from, as I mentioned, Tulare County. And so to give you an idea of the students and the districts that we serve and the staff and teachers, here's where we're located. This gives you a little visual. So not quite the armpit of California or that central. Sometimes we're like, California bones, we're the armpit. That's where we are. But we're located there. We have a larger county for our area. We're sandwiched in between Bakersfield and Fresno. And so we have 43 districts. 23 of those are small schools or single school districts. However, we serve over 100,000 students. So of those 100,000, 79% are economic disadvantage. So we have that challenge, but it's also a great reward because our main industry is agriculture in our area, followed by healthcare as well. We have about 23% of English learners, and about 18% are fluent English learners, fluent proficient. So if you add those two numbers together of multilingual learners in our area, it's nearing that 40-50% mark. So we are blessed to be able to represent such a diversity in languages and also in cultures as well.
I think, yes, and to add to that, in Tulare County, we are both ELA, ELD curriculum specialists. My background was in middle school and high school, and then I'm honored to work with my colleague Ryann, who has that same title, but in addition, she also is a co-lead of the English Learner Network and leads the Dual Language Network. So great deal of expertise that I learned from as I work alongside her. And in CCLA, we have, how many schools do we have?
Yes, we have nine districts and represented by 50 individuals who are part of that network, ranging from administrators, coaches, and teachers as well. So we're pleased to be able to support. If there were if you heard me earlier, 43 districts, and if we represent 9, that's about what? About 20%, near 20%. So we're pleased with the supporting our districts and recognize that they're involved because there's a need with that.
Yes. I think the best part is that we're in classrooms.
Yes.
So we are in classrooms alongside teachers working with their students on reading and writing and speaking and listening and making those connections, which is our first place where we want to linger for a moment. So if we're looking at the connections, and what does that look like for a literacy lens? Because we need to bring connection before we do content. So that SEL piece. So thinking back to your readerly life, take a moment, and who was an adult that inspired you, that motivated you, that encouraged you to be a reader, or maybe, had some kind of influence on your reading life? If you just want to jot that down for a moment.
Yeah, and we also want to say welcome and recognize our virtual participants. And so please feel free to drop your comments in the chat as well.
Yesterday, Ryan, when we were talking about our reading experiences, mine, I can remember when I was like 5 or 6 years old, a lady behind the house where we lived, she would read to me the afternoon when my parents were working. I'd go stay at their house, and she read Alice in Wonderland. So chapter by chapter, I can remember sitting by this koi pond, and she would read me stories. And that just really brought my love for fantasy novels and that genre. And it was really a nice time that we lingered. Now, going through middle school and high school, it transitioned to having to read a list of books. I didn't love it as much. Right? If you just want to talk at your tables about what you shared, who impacted your life, and in the Zoom, if you could go ahead and drop your ideas in as well.
Yeah. Yes, give us a signal if you have some. Okay, okay, okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, yeah. No, he was just saying that he's got some comments already in the chat. So as you ask people, we can ask Joseph to share what's in the chat. Yes.
As we come back together, go ahead and wrap up your conversation. So much excitement. What I observed, you were smiling, people were nodding their head, listening to you. Does someone want to share out for us their experience? And it can also be from the Zoom, if you have some, Joseph.
I just wanted to share from the Zoom. Someone said, Jenny said, my dad told me that if I could read, I could learn anything. I also thought it was sweet. Sue said that my elementary school librarian was the one. Or Jennifer, my mom read to me when I was young. I also grew up without a TV.
Oh, very nice. See a lot of nods and affirmation. I heard over here a mention of a library. What was the experience that you were sharing?
I'll just, I'll use my teacher book. Oh, we gave for this. The local librarian in my small town in Iowa, Mrs. Bryant. I remember coming in when I was in first grade, and I had to get the second card because she'd stamped the first one so much. And she said, we never have a first grader go to the second card. Good job. So.
And those memories stick with us, right? Thank you. So reading is really about building community, and it lingers with us in our readerly life as we go through. So Ryan, go ahead. Okay.
So for today's agenda, we're really going to start with what is acceleration, specifically when we talk about reading, right? So hopefully throughout the day yesterday, you kind of picked up some information about acceleration, but we have a focus specifically on reading comprehension, activating prior knowledge and the importance of content and what we mean by that, then reading and writing connections, and then we'll share some strategies with you. And then close with sharing some of our work from our network as well. You have access to some resources, so we'll give you a minute to scan this QR code if you prefer, or you can write down that link. It is also linked in Sketch. So if you've downloaded that app, and if you're clicking on today's session, then you'll be able to click on a link that goes straight to this agenda. And so every handout that you have in front of you, you'll be using, feel free to write on it because we've included those links as well on this agenda. Okay. With that, we invite you to really consider your learning stance today. And so we are privileged to have many teachers in the room, and we love that because that means that implementation of what you're learning today gets right to the student level. And so we appreciate that. But if you are a coach or administrator in the room, also be thinking about some of the things we shared and how you can support the implementation or the sharing of those strategies or concepts at your site or in your district as well. So jumping into accelerating reading, thinking about learning acceleration, and just as a refresher, when we talk about learning acceleration, it's really that laser-focused approach. You're really identifying that knowledge or that skill that students need for that grade level mastery so that they can participate in grade level content. And it's providing that just-in-time support for that. We use to do that. So that's learning acceleration. But to do that, we have evidence-based strategies that we employ and to really master those skills. Having said that, we want to think of what is and what isn't acceleration when we're talking about it. So acceleration is not just simply filling holes. So, for example, gosh, the student is in 8th grade, and I see that he's, really struggling with, let's say, blending. So I'm going to reach all the way back to, a lower grade level, elementary, and bring forward that foundational standard and really help them with that. Okay, that is not acceleration. That's really stretching and reaching all the way back. And the concern is that we're taking students, when we do that, out of that accessibility and out of that grade level content. And when we do that, we put them further behind because we're filling gaps way back here. And when will we ever catch up to get them at that grade level? So we really need to live in that grade level context and in that content and really say, okay, for this grade level assignment, what do students need? And where's that bridge? Where's that connecting piece? And that's why we really refer to acceleration as that bridge. What is it they need that I can support them with right now? So maybe instead it could be syllabication, and I'm going to really help them. Or maybe being in 7th and 8th grade, it's those roots, Greek and Latin roots, right, that are already part of your standard anyways in those grade levels, but really honing in on those, that is what you can use as that bridge. So you're keeping them within that grade level context. But now that you have an idea of acceleration, I want to turn it over to you to start to think about and refine your thinking about comprehension, specifically reading comprehension. If you take a minute and at your table, have a conversation about how you would define reading comprehension. And if you're joining us virtually, we are going to put you in a breakout room during this time, and so that you will have an opportunity to also connect with others and share how you would define reading comprehension.
We have tables. Straight to the point. Did you hear what you were talking we won't measure you. Probably when you understand trauma, you
Okay. So now I'm going to open it up to the whole group at this point. And I'm going to invite you virtually and also in person to give your quick definition. If it was a one-liner, what would you say is reading comprehension? I heard a lot of great thinking out there. Yes.
Basic definition, understanding what is happening in a passage or a text.
Okay. I'm sorry. One more time.
The understanding of a passage or a text.
Yes. And taking background knowledge, vocabulary knowledge, syntactical knowledge, and the knowledge of the content area, and putting that all together in order to understand a text and then to apply it to new situations.
Anyone else? Okay. Anyone else? You have. Okay. So as we think about comprehension and reading comprehension, it really, we started off by pulling some definitions. Take a look at these definitions and how close were you? What parts did you connect to? And what might you add from these to enhance or refine your thinking? Mm-hmm. 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 So raise your hand if in your table group you heard some of these pieces. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so we were, right, we've got that understanding, we've got that background of reading comprehension, that it involves several skills and several abilities within it, but it's really that idea of we're making meaning of the text. Okay. And it depends on what view of reading or what theory of reading that you really feel most comfortable with or subscribe to. But it's amazing how our understanding of reading comprehension has grown over the years. And so we started off with the simple view of reading, right? Where reading comprehension was the product of decoding and also language comprehension. But then behind that, or after that, excuse me, came the active view of reading. And the active view of reading took that and then expanded it a little bit to also include engagement and motivation, as we see represented in the active self-regulation piece, but then it also highlighted language and culture as a part of that. And that is where we have in that language comprehension piece. And then, of course, we all know Scarborough's rope, right? Or if this is new to you, this would be something to kind of dig into. But it really takes that those two pathways right there of word recognition and language comprehension, and then breaks it apart into those skills and weaves them together as students become fluent, and then leads to that skilled reading. So when we think of comprehension, it involves quite a bit. And so my question is, do you have ways of identifying those skills in your students? Because it is very challenging to accelerate a student if, for example, you're not sure where they are with fluency, or you're not sure where their word recognition skills lie, right? And so thinking about that, I'm going to encourage you and invite you to save these slides and refer to them, thinking about some of those skills and strategies, and do you know where your students lie within those? Because in order to accelerate, we really need to know where our students are and what their strengths are currently, so that then we can support them in grade level and really begin to accelerate or move them forward. If we don't know where they're at, then we don't know where to support the student. So really thinking of what are ways, Ryan, that I can get to know my students' skills and abilities when it comes to those things. And it could be examining their work. It could also be diagnostic assessments or even observations. So thinking about your district and what tools that you have to really get to know where students are at, so that you can really identify clearly what you need to accelerate to improve their comprehension. Jenean and I brought a few tools to support you in that process. One of them yields and bends more towards social emotional learning, because motivation and engagement, as you saw in the active view of reading, is huge. And so getting to know what motivates students and really what they get excited about when it comes to reading is essential. So we have brought and shared with you a few reading interest surveys. And so those are good ways to know what motivates and encourages your students when it comes to reading. In addition, we also, because reading and writing are connected and very reciprocal, right? So we have also brought writing interest surveys as well, so that when you get to writing and you have getting to know your students, you can use this with all of your students, but especially those that you would like to accelerate and like to support, starting with what inspires them and what engages them when it comes to reading. Okay. So now that we have an idea of acceleration, that is really taking a student's strengths, keeping within the content of grade level content. And that's where I want to hone in right now. It's that idea of grade level content. The CCEE, in their Accelerating Learning Playbook, which we've provided a link for, they have this quote, and it says, "Focusing on the most critical content helps us create clarity, coherence, and purpose in learning, guiding students not just to catch up, but to move forward with confidence." The word I want you to hone in on right there is the idea of clarity and coherence, and the importance of really knowing your content and those content standards specifically. There was 3 items that the playbook really highlights, and that's that idea of are you clearly sharing with students those big ideas? Do you have those essential questions? Are they coming from your standards? And so they're connected and really standards-based and driven. That's really going to be essential, because clarity is purpose. So if you're using learning targets, success criteria that are based on the skills and knowledge embedded in those standards, that's awesome. That is that first step. The next is really those learning progressions. So now that you know and students know exactly what's expected, then it is identifying where they're at and then where they need to go next. And that's where learning progressions come in, and we'll dive into that in just a minute. And then when it comes to reading and writing, ensuring that there's equity and there's meaningful learning happening. And this is where the components of CCLA come into play. So specifically with cultural sustaining pedagogy and providing those mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors for students to see themselves within the literature, for them to really see the world around them and make those connections. And that is important, because when I read about something that I have a connection with, it enhances my understanding, which then supports my comprehension of that text much better, right? And much clearer. And so when we have those options of text that we're selecting or choices that we're providing for students, being aware of the students that we have in the room, and really their culture, their background, their language, their experience as well, which then circles right back to why those reading and writing interest surveys are so important, because that's where you're going to get that information. As well as we've also included another document on the agenda links, which just talks about some getting to know your student strategies as well. So honing in on learning progressions then. So we've got our success criteria, we have our learning targets that were derived from our standards. And so now we have assessments going, so we understand where students' knowledge and skills are when it comes to reading comprehension. But we need some sort of tool to help us identify where they're at. If they're not meeting our grade level standards, then where are they? And that's important, because then I can bridge figure out ways to then pull them forward or support them in grade level content. And that's where learning progressions come in. They really help us identify those steps or stages that students typically go through and with a particular skill, knowledge area, or competency. In addition, they're really like a sequential path, and I'm going to use that loosely because there are many ways to arrive at a certain skill, right? Not just one, but but they build on each other. No one size fits all with the learning progression, but it does provide a great guide, a great support, right, for us. And so that's where we're going to pull your first handout. So you have a handout on, this is from Standards, Assessments, and Accountability through WestEd. It seems complex, but because there are a lot of words on the page, but let me just orient you just for a minute. Up at the top, you have the strand, and that is the reading and writing habits and dispositions. So what WestEd did is they took our reading and writing, language, speaking, listening, and foundational standards, right? Everything that's part of literacy. And they put it in 5 strands. They said all of these standards really we can group into 5 main areas. And so one of the areas is reading, writing, habits, and dispositions. Then as you look below that, you have 3 columns for each of the grade spans. So you have elementary, which is K4, so you have 1 column K2, 1 column 3, 4. In the middle, you have middle school, and that's grades 5, 6, and 7, 8. And then in the last column, you have grades 9 through 10, or high school targets. And the way you read it is it very much, again, a progression. So you would start under the kindergarten, or K2, and you would start with that first standard or first target, and you would read it down, and then you'd come up to the top, 3rd grade, and read it down, and go back up and down. So it really is that sequential, a path, if you will. What you see is the target, and then in dark blue, you have the standard that's aligned to it, or standards that it's pulling together. Usually there are several, because in ELA literacy, we know there are many that are working together. So I'll give you a minute to take a look at that and read through some of those.
I think on the strand, Ryan, to remember it's about enjoyment, motivation, and confidence.
Yes, yes, thank you.
When I taught in Los Santos, regarding the 6th grade elementary.
And again, being a learning progression, it is not meant to be followed lockstep. This is the only path, right? It's a guide, if you will. So depending on your school configuration, you might have 6th grade in elementary, right, as part of elementary, depending on also where a student might be at, you know, or where you might start, or maybe there's an in-between step there you're seeing and identifying that's not there, and that's okay too. This is just meant to be a good guide and support for, okay, what's next? If my student is here, what's next? Okay. So we brought along a video now that you've had a moment to kind of orient yourself to this. Where Jenean and I are going to invite you to watch this video. A student is Eli, and Eli is in the 4th grade. And I want you to be thinking about his reading habits and disposition as you watch this. And feel free, because you do have a link to this document, so feel free to write on it, to highlight as you hear something and identify where he might be. Go ahead and highlight or underline or make note of that.
Right, like, all right, we're gonna do a little reading today. We're gonna talk about reading, okay? Okay, Mark, talk about reading. So I have a couple questions for you first before we start reading, okay? Is it video on? It is. So what words come to mind when you think about school?
Well, I feel like, oh no, that means I forgot I have school tomorrow. I don't like math. I don't like work, but I do like math and science. But I don't like, and I like doing Google Docs and writing.
Okay. So if you had to think, talk about school in one word, what would
Can I tell you?
what would that one word be?
My favorite part about school is that you get to read.
Oh.
Because I like reading.
So what would you words that you like reading? What words would you use to describe reading?
It's because some books are funny, and I like adventure books because when you think about what it means, because I like to figure stuff out.
Okay. So how could we make reading more fun or be more fun?
Make it about me.
Okay. When you make a reading mistake, how do you feel?
I just start over.
How does it make you feel inside?
I'm just gonna start the sentence over.
So no big deal.
I don't care.
You don't care.
I forgot to tell you, Eli is very animated, so you're going to enjoy seeing him. We'll visit with him again in a minute. But right now, I'm going to invite you to use some of your inferencing skills too, because obviously this is all we know of Eli at this point, right? But use kind of some of your inferencing skills. And as you look at that progression, where do you think Eli is? What do you think he has? So have a conversation at your table. We'll also put you in breakout rooms as well.
One thing I was
So she said, do you want to work? The woman with they did like reading, they like writing, they did aloud. It was in the Stanford room, and they were really like having meetings.
Please, how you figure out?
I'm just reading books, when she's hearing stories. And like you think it's not like
Get it booked on learning out.
Thank you.
Oh, yes. Juliet.
So Ryan, are we going to take another look at Eli?
Okay. Yes, thank you. We just got back our virtual community. And so I want to invite you now to just share out, just a quick share. What are Eli's strengths? So as you look down that list, what does he have mastered? And again, we're inferring based on what he said.
Hi, good morning, everyone. We discussed many things at our table, and one in particular is that he's thinking about his thinking.
Other areas or targets that you know he's progressed to?
So he has.
Sorry.
He has some fix-up strategies. So yeah, for the Zoom people, I'm like, oh, you could probably hear me. So he has learned to go back and reread, which is a fix-up strategy, which is a Jen Richardson strategy. So he has some strategies to help him when he's reading text.
Anything from our virtual community? Okay. How about next steps? So again, we're inferring. Eli's in 4th grade, kind of putting that together with where might you take him next? Yes.
I think I'd help him select some books that are close to his interests, as he wanted to read more about himself. So kind of think interest or authors that would read those, write those kinds of books.
Yes. That's so good. That really stood out. He loves reading already. He wants to read more books like him.
Yes. How is this tool for you right now? Did that help you begin to identify where he is? I see nodding, and where he might go next, right? It's a good support. It's a good guide. We're now going to direct you to another strand in the learning progressions. And this one is a strand for reading at the word level. So the same idea, but with a different focus this time. And the strand at the very top says, reading is flexibly using a variety of strategies to make meaning literal and interpretive at the word and phrase level. So that's that definition of this strand. I'll give you about 30 seconds to kind of scan it and look through it, because we're going to revisit Eli and we're going to look for his strengths in this strand. Okay. So let's check in with Eli.
This chapter. Okay, right here. The word response. You can look around. Go ahead. Put your finger right here. Go ahead and start. You can look around. What do you see? Is that pen just an ordinary pen, or is it filled with invisible ink? Maybe it was used to send a coded letter to someone on the other side of the field. Like that rock over there, a rock, or does it have a hidden compartment? Maybe there's a piece of evidence or a key to a secret building tucked somewhere inside it. Is that coat just a regular raincoat, or could its buttons hold a tiny camera? Maybe a switch in the pockets can be clicked to snap pictures of something very far away. Lipstick is phone. And environmental UAV or insect hollow silver dollar, sub-major camera, hidden compass complex.
You come across some of these words where you're not quite sure
Compass.
what they're doing. Let's look at that again.
Hidden compass.
Does that sound like a word you know?
Compass.
It is a little
And I'm
compass.
compass.
That sounds more like a word you know.
Compass.
There you go. Good job.
3-meter radio receiver type. Look closely at the world around you. There could be spies anywhere.
So now I should have built a context for this. Eli is reading a book on spies. So when you first start watching the video, you freak out a little bit, like, what is this student reading? But it's about spies and informational text on that. So take a minute. This will be a quick conversation. By the way, for some of us, depending on how our brains work, we like to start with that kinder and work our way through and just kind of check. Yep, got that. Oh, he's right here. For others, knowing he's in 4th grade, your brain likes to work in the backwards model. So you're like, okay, he's in this column right here, and I'm gonna trace that back to see if he can do all of these things. So I'm gonna invite you a quick conversation, about 60 seconds. And in our virtual community, yes, we'll invite you to participate in the chat. Okay?
He is using grade level lines. It's like a nonsense word or, you know, like more practice reading out loud.
Okay. And if you can, we get to descend those conversations and we'll come together. So we didn't give you much time to share on this one, but we definitely want to begin to share some strategies with you and allow time for that. So just a quick share out. Where did you note Eli's strengths were? What were some of his strengths?
He didn't give up. He was very persistent.
He seems to have a good knowledge of words. He just doesn't have maybe the coding skills that he needs.
Yes.
Eli embraced the challenging words and went through his background knowledge and attempted.
Absolutely. So where might you take Eli next? What would be a next step?
Share one from the chat.
Oh, yes.
Well, we had someone say, Chris said it was difficult to hear, but when she was hearing, it said, able to read one word, but maybe 2 word syllables were a little more difficult.
So maybe strategies from multisyllabic words, right? Kind of surfacing and coming up. Again, what we've done so far is we have ensured that we have an understanding of the content that we're teaching derived from those standards, right? So we have then thought about our success criteria and learning targets, and we have those identified. We've done an interest survey, reading and writing, to know what Eli's interests are, and that's what you saw in that first video too, and that we can pull his habits and dispositions towards reading from that. We identified those. Now we're really moving to what supports reading comprehension, right? Specifically, we're looking at that word level, And now we're identifying using the progression to really identify what his strengths are and where we would go next. That really is that understanding that we walk through kind of quickly today, but walk through nevertheless, is really the foundation for acceleration and how we think about accelerating reading comprehension. What's next is now we're going to share with you, now that you have that understanding, it's like, okay, I know what to work on next, but what are some strategies that I can use? And that's what my colleague Jenean will be sharing with you now.
Thank you, Ryan. So there's some really good ideas, and as educators, we look at a lot of research, we read a lot of books on things to do, and we also want to lead into evidence-based strategies. So polling from the Institute of Education Sciences, these are the recommendations from the U.S. Department of Ed for the lower elementary. Reading comprehension, text organization, high quality discussion, making it purposeful, the selection of texts, so they can be engaging and motivational. As we move up into the adolescent years, and that's grades 4 and above, we have explicit vocabulary instruction, reading comprehension strategies, and you can read their similarities between the two. And the three that we're focusing on in our evidence-based approach is reading comprehension, high quality discussions, motivation, and engagement. So in your packet, you're going to have some of these strategies, and we're going to be focusing on the probable passages one. So if you want to pull out your probable passage, yep, it has words at the top, and it begins at that word level. So we work with our teachers in the classrooms, and during cycles of change ideas, we're like, hey, have you tried a probable passage? What would it look like with your students? And then we show them how it works. So that's what we're going to practice with you. With the probable passage, we have some key vocabulary. These key vocabulary are found inside the story we're going to be reading. You as readers are going to read over them and together talk about it and think, what might the story be about? Right? So you're going to come up with a description. So with your table group, or if you want to do it individually, read the words and come up with a description. What might this text be about? Go ahead and give it a couple of minutes.
Yeah, I was just like, this is a good one. Yeah, they have and I should say it's like they were in danger of the college. Okay, that was it's not family. I was Henry Robinson. I was in there when they share a site. A lot of them are pirates.
It's always smart to always.
It could be something.
It's like a summary, right? So you go and get it. Yeah. It's summary.
Yes, there's another one called story impressions. These were taken random, but the story impressions would go in narrative sequence. So that's kind of a nice way for them to work it up as well.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, and then within that, there's slides there.
Oh, wait. Is there any comment? Okay. I'm going to be following that. I heard some really interesting conversations. We definitely agree with her, right? On all things. And then the idea of betrayal, some were like, oh, this is about a disguise. People were noting, hey, they could kind of write a gist or a summary from this going in, which is a really nice anticipation before reading the text. And then we can affirm afterwards whether or not it is accurate. How many of you have seen the mood meter, SEL connections? All right. Okay. Good to bring it. So Dr. Mark Brackett, Yale University, science background, invented the mood meter. And it really is a way for us to gauge our feelings and our emotions. There are a variety of them depending upon your age level, but we brought you this mood meter. Looking over the words, We use it in a variety of ways with our readers. And considering compassionate systems, I really want you as a reader to be self-aware before we go into the reading of the text, how you're feeling about it. So look over the mood meter and come up with one word that would describe how you're feeling right now before going into the text. After you have that word, go ahead and share it at your table.
Do this. I was trying to find curious.
I know, yeah, like, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Elementary system, right?
Oh, scary.
Right?
Real dude. You were. I felt part of it. Okay.
Yeah.
They're good.
And bring it back in 3, 2, and one person in the Zoom room said that you're feeling curious. I also heard people saying secure, optimistic, right? My question is this. Why would you want to give this to your students before going into reading a text? Why would this be important to your students before going into the text?
There you go.
Personally, I would use this to help gauge how they're feeling, so I know how much more energy I need to put in to get them engaged with the text.
For that. That's so responsive, right? And what our students are feeling and the responsiveness as an educator where we need to change or affirm.
I think also we want kids to be able to think about their own reading and they reflect on that. So it helps them make that metacognitive connection to themselves as a reader.
Yes, pre-metacognitive thinking, yes. And sharing at your table, did you all have the same word?
No.
No, we all come into the learning with different feelings on that day, in that moment. Joseph?
Anna said to see if they have anything else going on before I can teach.
Yes, yes, right. Before we are teaching and we shut down and we're not figuring out like, oh, why aren't they getting this? It might be something we need to dig into first with social emotional learning and some compassion. So we love the mood meter and you have connected with it. How many have you done annotation to the text? Yes. And then talking to the text is just a little different. Talking to the text is where you put your thoughts, your questions, your wonders. You're not looking for like underline the verbs, define the imaginations, right? So these kind of ideas are more like, oh, this sounds scary. Or you might say, why not? You're going to talk to the text. Or what is so important about me learning this? Or I thought about this before when. So you have a text called Secrets of the Pirate World. Could you kind of make a prediction that our words from the probable passage were similar to being about a pirate? So go ahead and take all 1 minute. You won't get through all of it, but talk to the text as you read. Okay? Write on the text, talk to the text as you read. Okay? We got it. Okay, thank you.
Science.
Shorter passage.
I'll give you 7 more seconds. Just get as far as you are. Wherever you are is great. Right. Go ahead and talk at your table real quick. Just point out one thing that maybe you noticed when you were talking to the text. Go ahead and have a quick conversation.
No, I didn't. Always get back to
Okay. All right.
In about 30 seconds, we'll do a share out.
That's why or something like that. This would go into well, it made me look at the part.
All right, pick it up in 3, 1, 2. And at your tables, who might want to share out something they heard someone of their friends notice or something that they mentioned in talking to the text? Ryan, will bring you the mic. And we're going to call on you. Go ahead and share out what you're discussing. Oh, talking to that's good. Go ahead.
We were talking about how you're building the foundation for using text evidence when you're doing this and they're connecting, and they can have more to discuss when you have maybe a pair share or something like that. They're have made more concrete connection to the reading what they've read.
Thank you for that.
We were also thinking of ways to bring it down to primary, like for our kindergarten, first graders, by using symbols or emojis, and just be able to bring them into the text more.
Yes.
I love this.
Yes, thank you. Joseph?
In the chat, we had Kristen say, while reading, I thought about how this passage would be engaging for students in my intervention group. Also, Audrey added in that they teach CS or computer science, and this passage can help my students make connections to coding. And Audrey added on to that saying how coding has been around for a long time, that it's not new, not just used in computers.
Yes, cool, right? Yes. So many foundational things are bringing them forward so they can access that grade level content to do the textual analysis piece, looking at textual evidence. And it's starting at the beginning, not at the end, when we often ask them, now we want you to write and draw textual evidence. They didn't. If they've been tracking from the beginning, it would be much easier for them. Yes.
Just a question about how you would use this in the classroom. We've done certain things like this, but would this be something that you would maybe just start out and say, let's just talk to the text? Would you give them sentence frames? What is your recommendation for introducing it?
Such a good question. Initially, I would want to see what the cognitive they're processing, and it would give it to them just like I did you. Just talk to the text, add your questions, your wonders, what's going on. For the conversation, after listening in, we could implement some sentence frames to get them to speak about the text. Yeah, good question. Right. All right. Recommendation 2 was about combining that reading and writing together in an activity. The comprehension goes deeper and the meaning making does as well. So helping students make connections through the reading and the writing. In talking with California Department of Ed, if we could increase our writing scores and particularly elaboration, our students' test scores would increase. So we are going to look at some elaboration and what that would look like specifically based upon the reading that we just did. And elaboration is expanding, adding more details, and the sensory language through dialogue or through actions. It's difficult often for our students to do, right? It becomes almost like bulleted, fragmented thinking. So getting them some practice with language on a daily basis of what elaboration looks like can help them in their text when they go to writing it. So show, don't tell is one that we have brought to our networks. The simple sentences are at the top. The cake tasted good. It was a cold day. Sarah was nervous about her speech. And then we would invite through UDL of choice. You could choose any sentence, and you could choose sensory details. And we would have already pre-taught, at this point know which students don't know what sensory details means. But you could include greater sensory details for elaboration, or you could include sensory details and bring in an action. Or you could do dialogue and some actions. So we would show the students the example and what we have explicitly done here. Right? Can you think of other ways that you would say the cake tasted good if you were to include dialogue in your minds? Can you think of what that would look like? You see head shaking, right? And it was a cold day. Definitely we can think of dialogue, right? And action, what that would look like. Another one that we brought was the power of 3. Oftentimes in life, you'll feel that things happen in 3s. Well, in writing and elaboration, it does as well. So it's very easy whenever they think about including 3 details in a way to elaborate on something. Now, that's called the power of 3, and you have just read a passage on pirates. And in a moment, I'm going to be asking you to write a sentence with the power of 3. But this is an example first of what was taking place in the classroom. The original sentence was, his room smelled. So they were trying to write a descriptive about this character. We could definitely get a feel for this character's trait already. But to elaborate, they added a tangible item, and an idea. So it was, his room smelled of Axe cologne, dirty socks, and failure. Do you notice the last one is the idea, right? Great elaboration, thinking beyond the page of what could be taking place. So in the world of pirates is filled with, and I'm going to invite each of you to do a sentence with the power of 3. It can be a tangible, and then an emotion, a feeling, or an idea. Go ahead and write your sentence. Sometimes if you're seeing a student kind of linger in thought and they can come up with 2 tangible, but they can't make that third one, is they're reading, they're not able to make a lot of inference yet, right? So their thinking is very linear. So that's a good notice for us to be able to accelerate and give them opportunities to express kind of more vague ideas as they do so.
And Jenean, I'm also seeing individuals providing their own scaffolding through conversation, and then also other individuals referring to the text for ideas as well.
Yes. All right. We're going to ask you to talk at your tables now. Go ahead and share your sentence. No.
Okay, well, she can. And then they were all like liberation. And I was trying to also think of something that you remember a lot. Betrayal. I was questioning myself. Unknown, it wasn't supposed to happen. I feel kind of unknown.
Such good conversations. So I could bring it back, and then we're going to ask you to share out in a moment. But as a facilitator, one thing I'm really enjoying is hearing the variety of sentences, hearing your interest, seeing the laughter, your affirming people. And so students need that to build their confidence, right? To build their confidence so that they can try. So you're thinking of self-awareness and collective efficacism is what you're working on together as a group. We have a couple of sentences, and we're going to start with the ones in the Zoom chat.
So we have Anna. The world of pirates is filled with maps, codes, and intrigue and mystery. Kim Nguyen says the world of pirates is filled with maps, compasses, and determination.
Right. I'm going to ask you to go to the table right over here, because in listening to these two sentences, listen for the tone and our shift in tone. So could you read yours first, and then we'll have her? Yeah. So listen for the shift in tone.
Okay, for mine, the world of pirates is filled with maps, treasure, and anxiety.
The world of pirates is filled with opportunity, treasure, and promise.
Oh, could you tell the tone shift, right? So if they're going to develop a character, they would be different. And so often in the classroom, when students start writing, they have a difficult time generating ideas. Right? When they go to college, Penny Kittle now teaches in college, and she'll say, my students do not know how to generate ideas. They want me to tell them what to write about. Right? So from this power of three, if I asked you on a daily basis, and we practice some of this power of three a couple times, and come Friday, I say, take one of your power of three sentences and extend it into a story or an informational text, do you think students could find something to write about? Right? It's a way of generating ideas, to accelerate them, to bring their own thinking forward. Are there any thoughts that you want to share before we move on? Say a lot of nods. All right. All right. Thank you. So here we're going to just what resonated with you and something you would like to dig into more. And go ahead and have a conversation, and we'll listen in.
That's too long. I know who's in there. I know he's like, like, how would you each one? You want to send one from here? How would you? Right, yes. So, I finally watched the countdown.
Yeah.
You guys have some time for your hand for that sassy line.
Okay. I'm going to pull us back together again as we start our descent in the last 15 minutes of this session. I appreciate the thoughts in the room. I'm going to make connections to a few things. So a couple of things I was struck by as I was observing and watching and thinking about was making some connections between different things that Jenean shared. So for example, in the power of 3 that you just tried, the mood meter was also there as well and could serve to provide that vocabulary support as well, right?
Totally looked at it, right?
But that's another tool, right, that you had at your disposal. So as we begin to layer strategies, and by the way, that is one of the recommendations in the IES What Works Clearinghouse documents that we referred to and that we're pulling from. These are evidence-based strategies. And it's that layering of strategies that Jenean just took you through and that provide that wealth of resources as you're navigating the reading and writing. I also want to make connections to a comment. Thank you so much for your question earlier about probable passage, or I'm sorry, talking to the text, about talking to the text and scaffolding for that. And draw a connection to how many of us attended Dr. Fry's scaffolding session yesterday. And so it was that idea she presented to us about the over scaffolding and under scaffolding yesterday. And the connection I was really making to what we did today was with learning acceleration and scaffolding, we always want to begin by finding out what students know and what they can do first, so that we don't fall into the over scaffolding. So I love what Jenean, her response earlier was that you want them to try, then you want to see what is needed and follow up with that support, so that we're always pushing students to that zone of proximal development that Vygotsky talks about and Pauline Gibbons, specifically with multilingual learners, that we're keeping them in that lens because we're responding to what they show us are their strengths, and then we're identifying their next steps from there. So your thoughts, your questions before we share a little bit about our work in the field. Okay, I did a pretty good job if there are no questions. So sharing a little bit about our network. So as we mentioned when we began this session, we have 9 districts, 50 individuals who participate in our network. Our network is really based on PDSA cycles of learning and continuous improvement. So we bring all 9 districts together, 9 teams together 4 times a year. And in between those 4 convenings, we have 2 site visits per district, where Jenean and I push into those classrooms, work with teachers, work with those students on the things that the staff has learned in those convenings. So it really is meant to be on the ground, right, working with the students and the teachers, those who are making the biggest impact and improvements in education. And so
it'd be like us saying, next week we're going to come to your classroom and see how this is going. So bring some, and the evidence or the data that we use is just what the students are saying, what the students are doing in their pieces. And that's what we're here to share, some data from the field. Our teachers have said we use the mood meter and it built empathy and commonalities between the students. The strategies were building students' confidence. Students hadn't said anything all year and now felt confident to share and talk. And it was easy for them to use. The level of collaboration was stronger. Instead of turn to your neighbor and talk, it was very specific, and the teacher was very intentional, and the students had more to say.
Just a few more insights. And again, we're sharing with you those tools that we shared with our network and worked with our teams in the classroom. So you'll recognize the mood meter. Using the mood meter while reading helps students identify and grasp the complexity of characters, especially those plot arcs and how characters change over time as well. Spotlight student voices in determining emotions of characters throughout the story. Made it easier for students to express their comprehension. And so tying right into that expressive language, right, is so important because that's how we know that students are comprehending a text. So it really provided that language students needed to express their understanding of the text as well. And so again, we just want to remind you, it all kind of begins with getting to know our students and through those writing interest surveys and connecting to that motivation and engagement recommendation by really building our units and our lessons around what speaks to students.
Yes, and we had writing interest surveys, and they took this in grades 3 through 8, and the teachers were blown away by the responses. I think we had a slide, so this is what the students did, and there was a lot of data there. I don't like data, but I like data from the standpoint it's easy and it's responsive for us to interpret, but this can be a lot to synthesize. So we had them put it through a copy machine into a PDF and upload it into AI. And in doing so, we asked AI to synthesize the data for us. So for a classroom of students, this is what they said. Their preference was for choosing their own topics. They needed to boost their self-assurance. They really had a fear of making mistakes. There was challenges still with revising and organizing, and their level of engagement kind of varied. So within 5 minutes, we were able to show the teachers what their students' responses had been.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. AI is a wonderful tool, and it really helps us synthesize large quantities. But also, you could consider focusing on just those students who you know need support in your classroom. And so maybe it's those 5 students who you really identified, who you want to accelerate, right? Really focusing in on them as well and doing it, chunks at a time, pieces at a time as well.
So from our data that day when we left them and we were going to come back in 3 weeks, some of the change ideas that teams chose, they were going to try to build some student confidence and encourage them or provide more immediate feedback one-on-one. There was going to be a choice and a topic. Instead of it being one topic, the teacher designed 2, so the students would have an option to choose from. And they were going to use these specific strategies and put them into place and try to be a little bit more creative with those opportunities. Mm-hmm. This is an example of what we went into one room and they were very excited to show us. They said, just look, this is the same student. This is their pre-assessment and this was their post-assessment. And our first immediate thing about reading it was the volume. So there was an increase in elaboration, an increase in volume. There was definitely stronger student voice as we were reading these, and they were starting to introduce academic vocabulary. And another one, the power of 3. Now, this is from a middle school classroom. And the original sentence was when I showed you earlier, the room smells bad. And these were examples that the students came up with.
And so now thinking about next steps, which is we would love to give you an opportunity right now and invite you to scan the QR code, or if you have the agenda links document open, you can click on that link and give you a few minutes to complete that survey. And today's session, just as a reminder, the title was Accelerating Reading Comprehension Strategies and Tools for Enhanced Learning. And I believe it's alphabetical when you get to the survey, so it would be under A.
Thank you. Not many of the teams, but I can really want to.
And a reminder, which is to visit CCLA website. You see the link here, and it's also available in the slide deck that's linked to the agenda. There are online courses for comprehension that are free and available. And I have heard that in the coming months or next school year, some of those courses will be offered for credit as well. So please, we invite you to explore those. They have to do with language, foundational skills, and as well as literacy.
That's great. And well, thank you for a great start to the day, and enjoy the rest of your learning. Thank you.
Thank you.